Does anybody miss Rayon?
Rayon had some signs, some fan signs out in the
Well, Rayon has fans, as she should. She deserves it. If you work that hard to look that good, you deserve to have some fans. Oh, well. I don't know what that means, but I'll take that as a compliment. There's always one drunkard out there somewhere. What's your point? What are you heckling about? Well, what do you mean by that? What problem do you have with, because I'm a man, I don't deserve to play that part, so you would hold a role against someone who happened to be gay or lesbian, they can't play a straight part? Well, then you make sure that people that are gay, people that aren't straight, people like the Rayons of the world, would never have the opportunity to turn the tables and explore parts that aren't. If you'd like to, after this, have a conversation, I'd love to talk to both of you. So, the door's open. There you go.
I do thank you for being here, though, and there are a lot of people who would like to hear the conversation, so I am going to continue with that, but thank you very much, and I do appreciate that. One thing, you and I did an interview earlier today down in Los Angeles, and I learned one thing that really fascinated me, which is that you actually haven't watched this film. And is that something that you decide as a rule not to do with your work, or is there something particular to this film that you want to wait and watch it at a different time?
You know, it's a part of the process that I don't really feel like I need to be a part of, I guess. You know, if I was in the editing room, if I was directing the film, of course I'd be there and making editorial decisions. But for me, it's I think I was there on the set. I read the script. I know what happens, and it's good for me to kind of step away and give it some time. So generally, I don't stick around and watch it. One day I will. I'll take a look one day.
Am I correct in understanding that you actually didn't have that much time between getting this part and filming? And if that's true, how did you go about deciding basically what to prioritize as far as the limited amount of time you had to get ready for this part?
Well, you start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the beginning for me was meeting with transgender people, listening, learning. You know, I had an interesting experience in my own personal life about a year or so before the script came my way. I was on tour with 30 Seconds to Mars, and I was doing a series of interviews with people all over the world, and I met some people at a mall in Louisville. This couple of young kids and their mom, and I was just really taken with them, and I asked if I could interview them at the show. They were excited to come to the show, so they came and I interviewed them. And it turns out that Daniel had been born a girl, and had been living his life as a boy for 8 or 9 months. He was 14 years old. And we had this really beautiful interview about some of the challenges, trials and tribulations, about exploring identity and gender. And that experience for me really helped to inform the choices I made. You know, I think other actors may have played Rayon as a drag queen, someone who enjoyed putting on women's clothing. But to me, I thought it was an opportunity to put a different kind of character on screen. And you know, you follow your gut and your heart, and you do the best you can to make people proud and represent people with as much dignity as possible. And that's what I did for the Daniels of the world and for the Rayons of the world. Of course, you can't make everyone happy, but you can.
I do feel like people always say LGBT community, but I do feel like the T part of the community often does get left behind. And I think that's one thing that is so special about this film, and one reason why I think it's so great that people are bringing Rayon into their hearts is because it is a way for people to understand that there is another section of the LGBT community that needs to be talked about and respected. So
I think so, and it's not, you know, I don't think that there's always any perfect scenario. You know, I'm a creative person. I act. I make films. I'm a director. I make music, and you know, I respond to creative opportunities and challenges, and you do the best you can with them. And that was certainly the case here. And ultimately, I think a film like this that hits people hard and resonates with people, it's really wonderful to be a part of a film like this that says something, I think, really meaningful and examines a period of time that was really challenging and devastating to so many people. I had another experience when I first moved to Los Angeles. I rented a room in a 3-bedroom apartment, and one of the other rooms was rented by a man in his 40s who was dying of AIDS. And I watched week after week as he withered away, you know, sores appearing on his body. He was filled with grace and charm. He was gentle, so kind. We would walk to the grocery store sometimes and he would stock up on all kinds of vegetables and make, you know, these shakes and try in an attempt to stay healthy. He ultimately lost that battle, but that's another experience that really informed the role in a really deep way.
I did an interview a few weeks ago with your co-stars Matthew McConaughey and Jennifer Garner at the Academy, and one thing that Jen said that was really interesting, I'm sure you've heard this many times, is that she said she never met Jared on the set of this movie because you were committed to maintain the character of Rayon the entire time. What was it like once the filming was over and you finally were in a place where you felt like you could drop that and meet your cast as yourself for the first time?
It was great. I kind of had the upper hand because I was watching them and listening to them the entire time and getting to know them. And of course, they got to know Rayon. And really, I think, you know, that term "staying in character" is a little bit of a negative connotation to it. But to me, it means being incredibly focused and committed, and concentrating and using the time of the day to explore and experiment. And that happened to me quite a bit. I remember I had a break one day and went to Whole Foods. Don't ask me why, because I wasn't eating. I would basically go there and, you know, stare at the cashews or something and just salivate. There'd be a pool of drool underneath me. But I walked through Whole Foods that day, and because I stayed so close to the character, I had an interesting experience. You know, I had someone look at me and be like, "Is that Jared?" No, couldn't be. And then I had someone else look at me and be like, "What is that?" And then I had somebody look at me and say, "I don't know what that is, but I don't like it." And you know, that feeling of condemnation, of judgment, although for me, short-lived and easy to deal with, gave me a little bit of insight into the bravery that it takes, the real courage it takes to live your life as you dream it, not as others would have you live it. And I think that's a key thing.
For people who have seen the movie, one of the most powerful scenes comes near the end where you go to visit your father at his place of work and you go visit him as Raymond. I would imagine that scene was filmed later in the process because you are quite gaunt in the scene. What was it like for you when you were on the set that day, maybe looking at yourself, doing last looks before you went on, to see yourself in that body after being Rayon for such a long time?
Well, I knew it was a really special scene. Do you guys remember the scene where I went to see? I knew it was a special scene on the page. It was very emotional. You know, I go to see my dad and to tell him, really to say goodbye, and to say that I forgive you, and to ask for help. But it's the only time in the film that I was wearing men's clothing. And I was incredibly concerned that when I took off the heels and the tights and the skirt and the wig and the lashes and the lipstick, that rayon would disappear. But I was relieved to find when I put on Matthew's suit and glided across the bank floor that she was alive and well. And it was a very intense day. I remember doing the first take and just bombing. It was terrible. I kind of went off to the side and took a deep breath and reminded myself that I'd done the work and it was going to be okay, not to panic too much. So I went back and did another take, and some magic happened, you know. Some inspiration struck, some truth came from somewhere, and I said these words to my father and was caught up in that moment. And the next thing I saw was the director walking on to the set with tears running down his eyes. And he said, you did something that's going to live forever. And that was really wonderful when it happens like that. Yeah.
One day when you watch the movie, I think you're going to like it. But congratulations on the performance, and thank you so much for being here. Jared Leto.